Welcome to Off Hours, a conversation between John Edwards and Chris Manning.
Looks like you're making some solid progress on your case there.
Things are moving along pretty well. I should have enough of the case done by the end of this week that I'll be happy. I leave for the UK in a week and a half, so I need at least a basic case and buckle made by then. I definitely won't have a dial. I probably won't be able to even put the movement into the case by the time I leave, but I will at least have the case assembled, probably a basic polish put on it, so the lugs are there and everything. So it'll resemble a watch at that point. It just won't have the movement or the dial or anything in it. Mm-hmm. I'm happy that it's finally moving along and getting somewhere.
Yeah, well, with the strap on it, it'll give a strap on it, not necessarily the final one.
Yeah.
It'll give a pretty good idea of the presence it'll have on the wrist.
I've just got a simple black leather strap that I picked up that I'll use just to make sure that it's working. I'm also stopping in when I land in London on Thursday. I'm stopping in to visit Mia Sable. She does handmade leather straps. She's going to do a custom strap for me that'll eventually be my own strap. What I eventually use on my own watches and sort of move around between watches. And I'm probably going to chat with her a little bit about the possibility of making them, making all of the straps, just because I'll never be making a lot of these watches. Like, I'll never be producing 1,000 watches a year or anything like that, right? Like, it'll probably be 50 or fewer watches a year. So I'll see if she has any interest in doing, sort of 5 or 10 straps at a time. And
have you settled on a particular material
for the strap?
For the strap, like a particular leather?
No, I haven't. That's something that I want to talk about.
Or are you going to see what she has?
Yeah, I want to sit down and chat with her, because she has a lot of sort of weird and unique leathers, but I want to avoid those because that's the kind of thing that you can't necessarily get a hold of. I want to talk to her about what leathers she can get on a regular basis, sort of semi-consistently. I know there's always going to be color variance between leathers, even from the same tannery. But we'll see what sort of options she has, and what sort of she can get consistently.
So if you don't settle on something like Shell Cordovan, I seriously think you should consider just shipping her a moose.
Just shipping her a
Canadian
moose?
Flavor. Yeah, you can get a whole moose hide for about $50.
Yeah, but it's no, I can't do it.
A little too rustic for you.
Yeah, it's a little too on point. I can't.
Well, the Shell Cordovan has a bit of a Canadian flavor to it. Most of the hides that Horween gets come from Quebec, because you can eat horse in Quebec.
Yeah, I don't know. We'll see what comes out. I know there are a couple of tanneries in North America. There's one that Tamara dealt with when she did her course on vellum making last year, and they produce leathers for various industries above and beyond vellum. If she's not going to work out as a strap maker, or if it's just too expensive to do on a sort of on a regular basis, I might go down and talk to somebody like them, or see what I can do about finding some leather that I like and find somebody that can make them for me. But we'll see. The thing I like about dealing with her is the fact that this isn't the primary thing that she does, because she does traditional English saddlery. Mm-hmm. But this is something that she does a lot of, and so she knows what she's doing. The questions that she's asking are clearly from somebody who has made hundreds of, if not thousands of watch straps. So,
yeah, and bridles for horses have to keep up even better than a watch strap does.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
A little more of a life and death scenario there, potentially.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so that doesn't concern me so much. The quality of the work is from... actually, Matt had one of Mia's straps on the watch that... I can't remember the watch that he had on. Anyways, it was one of her custom straps. Although it's funny, because she said that a lot of people, when they get a custom strap done, they'll get just a single hole put in their watch strap. And I think about that. I'm like, how do people do that? My wrists change in size so much that if I tried putting a single hole in it, I would stretch it out. Like it would take me no effort at all to stretch it out.
My wrist stays relatively consistent. I think
Does
I
it?
can pull it off. Yeah.
Okay.
I don't think my wrist size has changed much at all in more than a decade.
Oh, mine will change enough in the course of a day that it can be a problem for me. Like at this time in the summer, I wear the link bracelet on my Apple Watch.
Yep.
And in the summer, I have to put in a link, and that's just so that I don't end up cutting off circulation. And in the winter, I have to remove the link. But even then, I can go from the morning, and the loose, the watch might be loose on my wrist, and by midday, it'll be tight on my wrist. So,
have you ever considered giving the sides of your link bracelet a high polish?
yeah. I've actually thought about doing the opposite and actually giving my watch a satin finish instead. Because
either way fixes the whole tangent break issue.
I agree.
Seems to be very anathema to the way that the design team works there. I was surprised that they shipped that bracelet the way that they did.
Well, I can understand why. I can't imagine that bracelet with a high polish on it. That bracelet would look horrible with a high polish on it.
No, just a high polish on the sides. Keep it nice and matte on the front, because you have a very distinct break where it meets the case. But the way that the fixation portion flows into the case, it's meant to conceal any sort of tangent break there, or at least give the illusion that there's no real difference between the surfaces.
See, it's funny because that's not the one. I understand what you're saying, and it is obvious when you look at it, but that's not what you see when you're wearing it, right? The one that you see when you're wearing it is that transition from the top of the case to the top of the bracelet, and that's the one that drives me crazy.
Yeah, that doesn't bother me so much, but
okay.
To each their own. So how would you, just hypothetically speaking here, how would you flow the grain over the surface of the case?
I would make the grain flow lengthwise. So I would make it go as a circular pattern around the entire
case. Okay.
Yeah, around the case. So the edges would be a long stroke. The the faces where the edges where the strap is connecting would be a very short stroke. Because that's the direction that the polish on the bracelet goes. So that's probably how I'd go about it.
Well, back to strap materials. An interesting product I learned about today is a fabric made from crab shells. So they break down a crab shell and then pull the fibers from that. And apparently it's very antimicrobial. So that might make for a decent material for the underside of a leather strap.
Yeah, that'd be interesting. I wonder what its properties are like how much it stretches and things like that.
Yeah, I don't know anything about it. I just learned about it.
Was this in the context of being used as a watch strap?
No.
Okay.
Mushroom leather is another interesting up and coming field. might be able to tap into that.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't see there being a hot demand for fungus on your wrist. I think you want to avoid the fungus.
Oh, come on, the fun guys will be all about it. I guess your timepiece is a little more restrained.
A little more traditional, I think. That's I think I probably end up staying with fairly traditional things. I have to decide at some point. I do want to make a bracelet at some point, but I know that that's not something I want to tackle for a while. But I think it would be interesting to make a watch with a bracelet, because the challenge of making that bracelet would be interesting.
Would you keep a similar lug profile to what you've currently got, or would you completely reimagine the way you're doing the case?
Yeah, I would do a different watch with a different lug profile, and I would probably use a lug profile where the integration between the bracelet and the case would probably be hidden underneath so almost like there's a shroud that comes over between the lugs to sort of cover it up a bit, just to sort of control that transition a little bit better, because I dislike bracelets where there's sort of that rounded edge that goes into the sort of between the case and the end of the bracelet, like there is with a leather strap. For whatever reason, I don't mind it with a leather strap, but with a bracelet, I don't like it quite as much.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. Now, would you ever consider going the high jewelry route and engine turning an entire bracelet?
Not sure that I'd ever do that. Although it would certainly hide the wear marks. One of the things that I do notice with my link bracelet on my Apple Watch is the scratches and wear marks on it are pretty horrendous. Now, to be fair, I'm also wearing it in the shop and abusing it, so it's not it's not surprising that it's that it's quite heavily scratched, but it would certainly help cover up some of the wear. That's for sure.
Well, you should have gone with the DLC version.
I've considered that actually. One of the things last year I was really close to buying the the black ceramic one with the DLC link bracelet, but it's it's like $2,400 by the time it's done, and it's like it's a little more than I want to spend on my Apple Watch. So,
do you take your watch off at all in the shop, or you leave it on?
No, I leave it on.
Right.
And that's one of the reasons why I've pretty much written off the aluminum one, because between the aluminum case and the Gorilla Glass on it, I would just destroy that watch. Like I know that I would. Like even Tamara, who's pretty easy on her watch compared to me, she's scratched up her the face of her watch quite a bit, and there's no way that I could wear one of the aluminum ones. I would just destroy that thing. Yeah, the other thing I was thinking with this watch, because as I said, I don't know how far I'm going to be able to get between now and when I leave, but I know for sure that I won't have a dial that works. So I was kind of thinking of if I get it where I can case the movement and be able to use it as a watch, I might just put like a hand drawn dial on it or something like that. Put like a big happy face on it or something, just to make it obvious that it isn't a finished dial.
Right. Since you're going to England, are you familiar with the independent watch journalist there, Alex Doak?
Alex Doak? No, I don't think I am.
For quite a while leading up to his acquisition of a Royal Oak from Audemars Piguet, he would hand draw watches, which he labeled Royal Doaks, until he finally acquired one. So he would strap on these pieces of paper that'd be somewhat reminiscent of a Gerald Genta design, and just have a Royal Doak scrawled across the face of it.
Nice.
So it's been a busy day for you in the shop. Your case is taking shape.
It's getting there. I had to redo that front bezel 3 times.
The third time's a charm.
Well, I don't know. We'll see. I kept cutting the recess for the crystal a little bit too large. So the third time I made sure that it's undersized, definitely undersized. I will cut it to proper size afterwards. Well, I'll experiment with it and cut it to proper size when it's a little further along. But
so do you already have a crystal and a gasket?
Yeah, I do. Yeah, the only thing. So the funny thing about this is one of those things that drives me nuts, because it doesn't seem to be a lot of good information out there about gasket sizes and crystal sizes and what sized opening to put it in. Like, for instance, if you go to the Cousins website, you can buy a gasket that's clearly labeled for a particular size of crystal. So, let's say it's for a 36 millimeter crystal. That's fine. And it gives you the outside diameter of the gasket. But that outside diameter, if you try cutting the pocket to that outside diameter, it's not going to compress at all, when you put it all together. So it's not going to hold it. So then the question becomes, how much smaller does does that pocket need to be to, give the right amount of compression without putting too much pressure on the crystal and the case. The crystal I'm less concerned about because it's sapphire, so it's pretty strong, but that silver will actually deform with enough force. So
what measurements did you settle on for the third round?
So the gasket that I've got is for a 36 millimeter crystal, and it's 36.7 millimeters is the OD for it. And so I've turned it, so I think it's like 36.2 or something like that right now. So it's definitely undersized for what it's, there's no way that it would be that small. At least I can't imagine that it's going to be that small. So it'll probably be a little bit of trial and error getting that crystal in and making sure that it fits.
Yeah, my guess would be like a 36.5. So that would give you a tenth on each side.
That's probably that's sort of what I'm guessing as well. And so I'm probably going to try like a 36.3. That's probably I doubt that it'll even go in. Like it'll even try to go in, and then sort of try and edge up on it a little bit and see what I can get.
Well, mineral and sapphire crystals are relatively new on the scene in mass-produced watches. Up into the 70s, they were largely using plastic or acrylate crystals. And prior to that, it was often just made from straight glass. And you actually had a lot of watchmakers who would become optometrists because it was also a lucrative business without as much of a possibility of work coming back to you later. And the watches being what they were back in the day, 100 years ago, they tended to break far more easily too, because you didn't have shock resistance or waterproofness or even dust proofness for that matter in most watches. So they were very often in for service and needing some TLC. So it's much easier just to grind glass to help someone see better.
Yeah, and with the glass, it's a little bit flexible, so you can actually deform the glass just ever so slightly to sort of slide it into the recess, right? Like you can put a bit of an angle on that recess and just deform the glass slightly, or even the plastic, and just drop it in.
Yeah, and that's exactly how they work. Yeah.
Yeah, but of course, there's no way you can do that with a sapphire.
No, you'll end up with a pulverized mess if you try and bend the sapphire.
We'll see what happens. It's it was a bit frustrating. I spent a couple of hours longer turning bezels than I anticipated. But last thing I did do is I did get the center band and the center bezel and the top bezel soldered together. Wasn't my best soldering job, but it'll do for the prototype for now.
So you're prototyping in silver?
Oh yeah, yeah, absolutely. The thing about prototyping it in silver is that it's relatively inexpensive. It's easy to work in, right? Like I can easily cast it, I can easily machine it, I can roll it into sheet if I want to, I can deep draw it if I need to, and I can basically do all of the things that I will probably end up doing to these watches once they get into sort of production in another metal. The problem with something like brass is that it hides, because it's so easy to machine, it hides a lot of problems in the actual manufacturing process. And I wouldn't make, let's say, an 18 karat gold watch in the same way that I would make one out of brass. Because with brass, I have a 2-inch diameter rod of brass that's 2 feet long, and I just turn it out of a solid chunk of brass. Well, if I had a 2-inch diameter rod of 18 karat gold that's 2 feet long, I wouldn't be worrying about making watches, right?
No, you go retire on a beach somewhere for a couple of years.
Yeah, exactly. So, so that's the problem, is that it doesn't really mimic what I'm going to be doing in the final pieces. So, and I expect some of them will be in silver as well. Like don't know that I'm going to use Argentium or sterling, but there's a sterling alloy out there that I want to experiment with that has 3% palladium in it. Apparently, it's completely tarnish resistant, and at least that's the claim. Unlike Argentium, which will eventually tarnish. Apparently, this stuff never tarnishes. So I want to experiment with that a little bit and try it. It's about twice the price of sterling, so it's a little bit more expensive, but it's not heinous. But regardless of whether I'm using palladium 500 or platinum or 18 karat gold or whatever, all of those metals, I have to be, I'm going to have to fabricate using some casting techniques, some turning techniques, some deep drawing probably for some of it. And so the silver mimics that much more closely than prototyping in, let's say, brass or something like that.
Yeah. Is that non-tarnishing alloy proprietary mix, or?
I don't believe it is. I think it's unlike Argentium, which is, technically a trademarked or a patent protected, I should say, process. I believe this other alloy is not. So it's 92.5% silver and then 3% palladium, and then the balance is copper. So, I mean, you could technically even make it yourself. Like, you don't necessarily need to buy it, pre-made. It's just convenient if you can. I wouldn't mind trying some of that out and see what it's like. I think right now it's somewhere around $35 or $40 an ounce for that palladium sterling, versus something like palladium 500, which would be great to work with as well. But that's going to be more like $450 an ounce. And The problem with that is that I can't cast it. I don't have the facilities to cast palladium or platinum. 18 karat gold I can cast, but that's obviously a little more expensive. Oh, and then the other problem with working in brass prototyping is that casting brass is nasty. I can cast brass, but because of the zinc in brass, it's a really nasty metal to cast, and that's something we talked about earlier.
You don't want another round of zinc poisoning?
I think I'll pass on that. Yeah, it's funny thinking about silver as something to prototype in, but it's relatively inexpensive. It's easy to work in. I have a pile of it around, so I work in it all the time.
Oh, your hands are made of it.
That's right. Exactly.
So are you pleased with how the coin edge came out?
Yeah, for the most part. There's a lot of chatter in those cuts. I wasn't too concerned about this setup this time around, so it needs a little bit of tweaking, and these cuts are pretty deep compared to what I normally do. So I was getting a lot of chatter in the cuts, so I think I need to adjust the geometry a little bit on my cutters, and that particular cutter probably needs to be polished. It isn't the best engine turning I've ever done, but it certainly looks good, and I think it's going to work for what I want to do.
So you think the chatter is exclusively from the cutter, or is it also a result of the speed and depth of the cut coupled with the fixture you've mounted the ring onto?
Yeah, it's probably a combination of a bunch of different things. Well, the fixture itself is going to be pretty stable. Like when you look at that, the way that it's being held in there, that band isn't going anywhere. So I'm not too concerned about that. But because it's such a short length that's being cut, the beginning of a cut and the end of a cut are often not great. And it's sort of the middle of the cut that ends up looking much better. And the longer the cut is, typically the better quality of cut I end up with. I'm not entirely happy with turning such a short little band, but I didn't want to make a much larger band until I knew exactly what size I wanted, the dimensions that it needed to be. Because once I do know, I will just deep draw a tube that's the correct diameter, both OD and ID diameters. And that way I can turn, I can engrave a 3 or 4 inch length at a time, and then I can just part off. I think these bands are 160 thou thick or something like that. And so I can just cut off, however many I need and be done with it like that. Yeah, it's sort of funny the way that it works out, because engine turning a long piece, it doesn't take significantly longer than engine turning a short piece. If I was doing, like when I've done things like necklaces and earrings and stuff in the past, and you're better off engine turning, let's say, an 8-inch long sheet of silver and then cutting all of your pieces out rather than sitting there and trying to engine turn each little piece individually. It just takes too long to do that. Often the changeover between the pattern bar, so adjusting the pattern bar, advancing the cutter, all that stuff, it takes the same amount of time whether you're cutting a 1/4 inch or 3 inches or 6 inches or 8 inches. And it doesn't take significantly longer to cut a much longer cut. It'll be a little bit faster once I actually get into sort of making a bunch of these at once.
It looks like a pretty standard V cut. Did you think about, or have you ever experimented with doing different shape cutter tips to see what sort of patterns you get?
Like, are you thinking something like a curve or something like that versus
yeah, perhaps more of like a scallop versus just a sharp incise.
Yeah, a scallop would look good, and that's something that I'll probably experiment with at some point. It doesn't get the nice you don't get the nice facets that you get out of a V cutter, but you would certainly get a nice look out of it. So yeah, I'll probably experiment a little bit with that and see what works well. I don't think I've got anything that's a V cutter or that would work well for as a scallop right now, but that wouldn't be difficult to make up and get something with a radius on the front of it. Do some nice scallops on it.
Yeah, what you've produced so far reminds me of Peter Speke Marin or a Breguet case with a coin edge.
Absolutely, and that was the intention behind this case. So it definitely has hints of a classic Breguet style case. That was totally the intention behind it. It's not, I'm not trying to pull off like an MB&F, crazy design watch for my first watch. I wanted to do something that was pretty classic and a relatively standard look and feel to it.
which is an interesting contrast to what you have in mind for the dials.
Yeah, we'll see. I definitely don't want to do the standard Brigade dial. It'll be interesting to see. I still haven't figured out exactly what I want to pull off with the dials and whether I can pull off what I want to try. That's the big thing. There's what's in your brain and what you can actually do, and I'm not sure that I can pull it off yet. But the dial is sort of low on my priority list just because I want to get the case done and I want to make sure that I can mount the movement properly and everything. And then once I've got all that done, then it's easy for me to sit down and say, okay, now I can focus on the dial and spend 2 months or whatever just working on dials and perfecting those.
Have you seen the engine-turned solid gold dials that Votilan is doing for the Hourglass in Singapore?
Let me see. I don't know that I've seen those yet. Oh, I like that. I like the color of that. That's a really nice rose gold that he's got there.
I believe it's a yellow gold, but it's been treated to give it the salmon color.
Yeah, really? Okay. I love the color of that. That's now, of course, you don't know how much of that is photo post-processing, but that looks really nice. I like what he's doing there. And the engine turning work they do on their stuff is always so nice. It's I'm always impressed with what they do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, the description claims that the dial color has been treated, so I don't know exactly what they're doing to post-process it to give it that color, but
yeah,
it's definitely quite unique for a gold. I've not seen gold in that color before.
That gold has almost become an orange.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's reminiscent of salmon dial almost.
Yeah.
But he will often do enamel work on top of the dials, but this is clearly not enamel. It's some other process that they've used.
Yeah, it's pretty clear that hasn't been enameled. Oh, that is gorgeous. That's it's funny because I hadn't thought about doing a gold dial, but I don't really like the contrast of too much yellow gold with a white metal. So I don't mind having, let's say, like a white metal dial with a yellow gold case. I think that looks okay, but I find that having having a white metal case with a yellow gold dial, it's just there's too much gold there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's overpowering.
But yeah, you're right. It overpowers the white metal too much.
And you don't get the same level of contrast between the hands and the face as you do with, say, blued hands on a silver face that has been pickled is the wrong word. I can't remember. Bleached. There, that's the word I'm looking for. So the blue hands on a bleached silver dial give you much better contrast than, say, the same thing against yellow.
Right. And I've to be honest, I'm not really a big fan of the bleaching process. I think it really kills a lot of the beauty of what you're doing with the guilloche work. I understand that the entire dial can't necessarily be high polished, but yeah, I think that bleaching often takes away from a lot of the beauty of what you're doing with the dial.
Now, have you ever done much with any sort of electroplating?
I have tried plating some guilloche work in the past. The problem is that you lose a bit of the polish, and so you don't get quite the sparkle that you get out of just a plain polish or a plain engraved piece. So you do lose something from it, and it would work. I mean, you could certainly do it, and it would look okay, and in fact, it would probably look much closer to what the bleach styles look like, in terms of you're getting a bit of a matte finish, a bit of a sort of a softer feel to it.
And do you know of anyone ever engine turning, say, titanium?
Mm-hmm. Yep, absolutely. Good friend of mine, Peter Gilroy, down in Taos, New Mexico. He does a lot of work with reactive metals, so he'll work with titanium. He works with some niobium. I don't know what other metals he's working with. Don't know if he's done any zirconium. Anyways, he's done a bunch of work like that. He also does a bunch of guilloche work. So he's done interesting things where he's doing selective anodizing on pieces and engine turning it and things like that. So yeah, he does some really nice work with titanium.
Interesting. What sort of effect does anodization have any sort of effect on the surface texture in the same way that electroplating would?
Yeah, again, you're losing some of that high polish, right? You're never going to get the same bright sparkle cuts that you're going to get out of a straight like engine turning silver or engine turning gold and then just leaving it as is.
Yeah, so you lose some of that luster.
Yeah, and it's really you're losing some of that sparkle, right? So it's that's part of the problem. So Peter does some beautiful work using a couple of really great techniques. He uses some Damascus, and so he's doing some interesting work in Damascus, but he's also doing a lot of hydraulic formed work. So he will create formed dies and then shape the metals that he's working in with those with those hydraulic dies, and that gets some great texture. He's also a rock climber, so a lot of his work is inspired by the nature that he's often in, the mountains that he's climbing, and being in Taos, he's got some gorgeous scenery around there.
Mm-hmm.
So he's doing a lot of interesting work with hydraulically forming stuff. He does some neat carving of things to get designs reminiscent of mountain ranges into let's say some Damascus, and then he'll often inlay that with gold. Yeah, some great textures, a lot of really textural stuff. That's great. And then because he's working with titaniums, he can anodize it in stunning colors. So some of these pieces, there's one of the necklaces on his site, the Sunrise Uplift necklace, is just gorgeous. It's got this beautiful gold background that's been engine turned on a Rose engine. And then the sort of raised up from that in the foreground is this mountain range. It's in blue. And the whole piece is done in titanium, but it looks gorgeous. The colors that he gets out of it are just stunning. Yeah, you can do some great work with that, and he really experiments a lot with it and does some great work with it. You go and check out his stuff. It's fabulous stuff.
Yeah, the sunrise on that is a very interesting use of engine turning.
He's definitely pushing engine turning in a way that a lot of traditional engine turning work just doesn't do. And so that there's guys like him, guys like Rich Littleston, that are doing different things with their engine turning, and it's I love seeing this stuff. It gets me thinking outside of the box and to stop thinking about the stuff that Breguet was doing or the stuff that that Fabergé was doing, because even though that stuff is great and there's a place for it, there are also limits to it, and you don't want to get stuck into that that rut of just doing what other people have done in the past.
Now, do you know what sort of technique he uses for the masking when he's anodizing the titanium?
He and I talked about it a little bit. Have you ever done any titanium anodizing?
I've not.
My understanding, and I've never done it, and I only I've only sort of chatted with people about it, but my understanding is that there are two current ranges that you can anodize in. So there's a high current and a low current. And within each of those ranges, there's a whole range of colors that you can get. So there's a bunch of high current colors and there's a bunch of low current colors. And my understanding is that you can go off and you can do the high current anodization and get, let's say, the gold, for instance. Then you can mask it, and then you can do the low current anodization and get the blue. And that will it will then fill over the sort of the gold anodization that was done in the unmasked area. And in terms of masking, I'm not sure exactly what it is that he's using, but you can often use epoxies and things like that for masking. Like it's a relatively simple technique for masking it. Because of the two ranges of anodization, when you're working with titanium, you can do some interesting things where you're basically over anodizing something and you completely hide the fact that the other one is there just because they're in the two different ranges. Yeah, and he still gets a pretty bright cut out of that. Even with the anodization on top of it, it still looks pretty bright.
Yeah, and things like the necklace too. It's a much larger surface area than a watch dial.
Yeah. Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I don't know that I would ever experiment with titanium dials. I mean, I might. It's I'm not really set up to do a lot of work with anodization. Like I don't have a setup for playing around with different currents and stuff like that for anodizing, but who knows? Maybe maybe the next time I go down to Taos, I'll bring some ideas down with me, and he and I can play with it a bit.
Now, do you know if he has a preference between working with niobium or titanium? I mean, for the looks of things, he seems to favor the titanium. But
some of it is niobium. I think it's like the blackish metal that he's working in. Let me just see here. Yeah, so like let's say for instance, you take a look at some of these like granite earrings, where they're heavy granite texture to it, and it's a black metal with a gold, sort of a gold trace going down it. That black metal is niobium, and that's what it looks like after anodization. He does a fair bit of work with that. I don't know that he's engine turned any of the niobium. I know he's doing a lot of hydraulic forming with it, but I don't know if he's doing any actual engine turning with it.
Yeah, on those particular earrings, it looks like he's actually inlaid gold, and that's not a result of the anodization process.
Yeah, that's actually 18 karat gold that he's inlaid in there. And so he'll take the sheet of niobium, he'll mill out the trace of where the gold's going to go, inlay the gold, and then he'll hydraulically form the piece. So the gold ends up with the same texture because it's all part of the same sheet as it's being hydraulically formed.
And then anodize it after that. Yeah.
And then anodize it after that because, of course, the 18 karat gold isn't going to be affected by it.
Very clever.
Yeah, it's I like what he's doing with the gold inlay into the niobium, and again, because that niobium has such a beautiful dark color to it after anodization, the contrast out of it is stunning. So that might be interesting to play with as well. I do want to experiment with some alternative materials for making cases out of and making dials out of, stuff that people just aren't really doing anything with in the watch world. Obviously we've got things like carbon fiber and stuff like that. Like there are some weird materials out there, but there's some materials like this which are not being used at all in the watch world, and I think they could bring something a little bit different to it. I don't know how durable that anodization is. I expect it's pretty durable. With a little bit of gold accent or silver accent or whatever, you could create some really nice contrast with that and create some interesting designs.
Yeah, I've been experimenting with making a calendar indicator wheel, and the color he's been able to achieve with the niobium here has me tempted to possibly experiment with using some niobium once I have the design dialed in. I don't know if it will hold up at the thinness that I'm working at, but I'd be interested to see how it plays out.
Well, I can find out from him what's involved in anodizing the niobium, and I believe it's the same setup as what he uses for the titanium.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it is. I have a friend, and she's got a setup in her garage, and she does both the titanium and niobium as well.
Okay, yeah, I'd be interested in seeing how that looks. I think there's some interesting ideas there, and it's sort of midway down my list of things to experiment with for watches, but I think I could do some really neat things with this. And I don't think he's done any engine turning in niobium. I know titanium's a bit of a pain to engine turn because it's so soft and gummy. It doesn't engine turn very well, but he's figured it out. I know a lot of people just gave up on it, but I'm not sure if niobium engine turns at all. Based on the fact that he doesn't have any pieces up here right now, I suspect it probably doesn't engine turn well at all.
Yeah, the swarf that comes off titanium just goes on forever. It's razor sharp.
Oh, yeah.
I made myself a loop out of titanium back in watchmaking school, and I went through a box of Bandaids. Well, it's a bit of an exaggeration, but I definitely unintentionally cut my fingers a number of times just dealing with the bits and pieces coming off the lathe.
Yeah, you have to be careful with titanium. It's not a great material to work with in a machine shop. The swarf can catch on fire. It doesn't self-combust. It's not like zirconium. Is it zirconium?
I'm not sure about zirconium, but I know aluminum can ignite.
Yeah, aluminum. You still need to actually light it. Like, it needs to get to a fairly high temperature before it'll ignite. But the powders and stuff, like aluminum powder, will definitely burn. With titanium, if it gets too hot, the swarf will definitely burn. There's another one that the swarf can spontaneously combust, and it burns really, really hot, like a couple thousand degrees, and it can burn down your shop pretty quickly. So yeah, I know with titanium, you need to flood cool, preferably.
Yeah, I don't know if zirconium spontaneously combusts, but an interesting tidbit from a quick Google search is that it can spontaneously decay into niobium. Yeah.
Oh, really? Oh, that's interesting.
I know magnesium can be brutal when it lights up. They used to use that to get into the safes and stuff.
Yeah, I don't know. Magnesium is super dangerous. Yeah, it is zirconium. Yeah, zirconium chips will definitely ignite, and they are nasty. You have to be careful about disposing of the swarfs from zirconium as well, because it's you don't want to just pack that in. Like, for instance, you wouldn't want to pack some zirconium chips in with a bunch of aluminum chips, for instance, because the zirconium can self-ignite, and then once that ignites, it will get hot enough that the aluminum will ignite as well and will start burning.
Thanks for listening to Off Hours. You can find detailed show notes at offhours.show. If you'd like to keep up to date with the show, follow us on Twitter @offhours. John can be found on Twitter @UnderTheLoop, and Chris can be found on Twitter and Instagram @silver_hand.